I'm Gabrielle Martin, your host for this evening. And Open Your Eyes to the Youniverse is a series of contemporary talks and conversations, meditations, and also interviews with people who inspire and uplift others by sharing their wisdom, their insights, and experiences to co-create a better world. And as we begin in the spirit of reconciliation, the Youniverse team acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. And we pay our respect to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. And we also acknowledge and respect the wise elder within us all and the collective wisdom of all here this evening with us. So a very warm welcome. And last month we were in the company of longtime meditator Moira Lowe. And she shared with us some of the wisdom and insights that she's gained on her path of forgiveness. Together in conversation, we unpacked the process and benefits of forgiveness and the personal agency and freedom that forgiveness affords. But here tonight, we're joined by Maureen Goodman, and our topic is hope and optimism. And we're going to be looking at these as inner power tools for use in challenging times. Our world seems to be moving into greater chaos, just everywhere, of course overseas, but also here in Australia. And these are confusing times. Often our clarity is blurred, security is threatened, and authorities are questionable. Integrity is scarce. And that's only part of the global equation. But I think personally, at some point in our lives, most of us have probably felt that our life is, in general, and specifically, is out of control, just out of our hands. And it feels as if things are happening to us. And actually giving up isn't an option, because we know that when we give up, we check out. We check out physically, emotionally, or morally. And we know about the dangerous consequences of that: addictions, distractions, numbness. But we also know that hope is key. It stops us falling in a heap and staying there. And optimism softens the fall, and it lets us look up and toward the horizon. Hope and optimism move us forward, and it gives us encouragement to have another go. The Dalai Lama maintains that optimism doesn't mean that you're blind to the reality of the situation. It means that you remain motivated to seek a solution to whatever problems arise. And social research studies indicate that optimism and hope have been linked to better physical and mental health outcomes. It shows that optimism can help people to have more successful relationships and to be more involved in their community. It can also promote a sense of well-being during difficult times. While hope, often defined in physiological research as having a strong will to succeed and plans to reach a goal, is seen in this context as stronger than optimism at predicting academic success and people's ability to cope with pain. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? And there's plenty of scientific evidence that suggests that hope improves individuals' health and boosts their overall sense of well-being, their overall health. Well-known social researcher and author Brené Brown maintains that hope is a function of struggle. We develop hope not during the easy or comfortable times, but through adversity and discomfort. Hope is forged when our goals, our pathways, and agency are tested, and when change is actually possible. So a variety of opinions there, but tonight we're putting hope and optimism under our conversation microscope. Within a spiritual context, we're exploring what hope and optimism are and methods to develop these inner power tools. And I want to introduce our guest speaker a little more to you. Maureen Goodman is the Program Director for the Brahma Kumaris in the United Kingdom. And it's in this capacity that Maureen has had the opportunity to work with many diverse communities. Her interests include young people, women's empowerment, sustainability, and building spiritual capacity. So she's well equipped to talk with us and share her experiences on hope and optimism. She's also the Brahma Kumari's representative at the United Nations in Vienna, where she meets and dialogues with leaders actively engaged in politics, religion, science, and community. And Maureen's been involved in interreligious dialogue for over 40 years, and she currently represents the Brahma Kumaris on the board of the World Religious Leaders of the Elijah Interfaith Institute. And recently, just in 2023, she presented the Institute's plenary session at the Parliament of the World's Religions in Chicago. In April 2022, she joined a group of religious leaders on a visit to Ukraine as part of the Faith in Ukraine initiative. I think some of our viewers will remember that. It was an amazing moment in our global history, but a very profound moment in Ukraine. She's also an ambassador to the Peace Pledge to live loving kindness and compassion. And on another tangent, Maureen led the Brahma Kumari's delegation to the Climate Change Conference, COP27, and also the COP 2015. Yeah, the COP15 for biodiversity. So that was quite a while back, but the COP27 very recent. Maureen has a deep interest in spiritual and ethical dimensions of climate change, the nature of harmony, and the connection between our inner state of being and the state of our earth. Maureen's also part of the strategic circle of the Spirit of Humanity Forum. It's hosted by the city of Reykjavik and supported by the Prime Minister of Iceland. This forum creates a safe space for self-exploration and dialogue among leaders and change makers, actually seeking transformation based on core human values. So it's a pleasure to have Maureen with us tonight. She joins us from London, where she's based. Maureen, it's great to have you with us on Youniverse. I think it's probably about 9 a.m. for you in the morning, and it's summertime over there. Here in the Antipodes, well, we're in the early evening. It's about 6 o'clock, and of course, we're going into our winter period. So welcome to the Antipodes and welcome to Down Under, Maureen.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Gabrielle. Thanks for the introduction, and hello to everyone. And Om Shanti, a greeting of peace. So yes, I'll say good morning and good evening together. Hope and optimism, these words, well, much more than words. And sometimes we think that they move together, and they do. They're very, very closely connected. But there's a slight difference in how we use them or the concepts of them. But I would just say that these are two things that are so, so needed in the world. And they're also two things that are so, so lacking in the world. And as Gabrielle was sharing, about the research that's been done, how important and how motivating hope is. And actually, I just give a little definition, which I looked up, I have to say, but having looked it up, it then made a lot of sense to me. And I was beginning to see how it was working in my life or how I was observing it with others. And hope is when you actually are active. You set a goal, you work towards it, and you really feel that it's possible to achieve that goal. So you work with hope and you get a very tangible outcome. Optimism is a mindset, and optimism is about seeing the best, believing in the best, knowing, an inner knowing that the best is going to come forward, is going to happen. And I think where the connection is that an optimistic mindset enables you to be actively hopeful. And we'll go into it a little bit more, but just in terms of hope. And I remember it was a research that was carried out in the 1980s at the height of the Cold War. But then, of course, now, again, so much tension between what we call the superpowers. But they were doing, it was a research in hope. And they found that, and it was amongst children, and they found that the research found that where children had parents who were active in the disarmament movement, anti-nuclear movement, those children had a lot more hope than the ones who didn't have any sort of activism in their background. And that was very interesting and connects with what we said, that hope is about actually being active and working towards something that gives you hope. You know, the moment you start from a point where maybe things are stagnant, maybe things are not working in your life or, well, in our world, of course. But once you start to move, you have your first glimmer of hope, and then the next step and the next step. And I think many of you will know the Chinese proverb that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And so hope is about movement. And, you know, hope has really literally kept people alive. And I remember in the 90s reading what was called the Beirut books, and, you know, about the hostages who'd been taken hostage in Lebanon. And Terry Waite, who, okay, is very well known over here because in the UK, because he was the envoy of the Archbishop of Canterbury, but I think he's a worldwide figure. He was sharing about how he kept hope alive. And there are a couple of things that really touched me. He said he used his imagination a lot. So he would think about things. He wrote books in his head. And after he was released, he actually physically wrote and published one of those books. Another thing is that he would just live one day at a time, stay in the present. So it wasn't an imagination about the future, what if, because often when we think about the future, imagine the future, it's a what if, and it's not only what if everything goes well, it's very often what if everything goes wrong. And if you get into that kind of thinking, then really hope gets diminished very much. And the other thing that he said, I said to my captors, you can break my body, you can influence my mind, but my soul is not something you possess. And I found that very empowering. And so that inner spirit, that inner self that is resilient, that very much keeps hope alive. And of course, yes, the hostages were released and, you know, did amazing things after that. Think of different situations in the world. Think of South Africa. If the people there didn't keep alive the hope of democracy and work towards it, and yes, we know it all became violent at certain points, and I wouldn't advocate violence, of course, but still, that hope, that working towards that goal, it made sure hope was alive. And yes, that was achieved. Although, yes, I'm not naive enough not to know that there are a lot of problems South Africa is facing. And of course, there are now fresh elections happening just now. But hope, a very key ingredient to keep moving. And Gabrielle, you mentioned the visit to Ukraine in 2022. And, you know, the thing that struck me more than anything was the spirit of the people. Absolutely firm, absolutely strong. And that spirit is still there. I mean, I haven't been back to Ukraine, but I keep up with the news and I know people that I continue to connect with. And that spirit is still there. That's why they're still holding on. Now, yes, I would say war is not an answer to anything, and especially when we look at the Middle East, how can you say that war is the answer? But I'm not here to comment politically on things, but hope. And I remember a very interesting scene when we'd gone to visit a school where some refugees were there. And the woman there who was very animated, who was looking after the refugees, and the children were studying online. And someone in our group asked, are they studying online because of COVID? And her answer was, COVID? Who cares about COVID? You've got a war and there's no vaccination for that. And that made us laugh. But it just gave, the spirit was amazing. And of course, people were very touched that we went there not to take sides and condemn this side or that side. All life is sacred. We went there to be with the people and give a message of hope. And people were very, very touched by that. And I think this is another thing, that what gives us hope in very difficult situations is to know that there are others who are praying for you or thinking about you or working for you. That gives a lot of hope. And, you know, one thing is knowing about it. The other is really on a vibrational level, if you like. If somebody is really caring towards you, it's not so much what they do, but it's how they do it. And when you feel that sense of care, it really uplifts your spirit. And I know I have been on journeys with individuals who've been facing illness and so on. And I remember once one of our sisters, and she did eventually pass away, and through cancer. But I watched her heal all her relationships, and she left so peacefully. But what was interesting was that one day I was with her and I asked God, what can I do? How shall I be? And the answer I got was, be happy. Now, of course, not happy that she's ill, but it was about what is the atmosphere that she needs be around her for healing. And so where there's an atmosphere where, you know, people are praying for you, thinking of you, doing things to support you, that also vibrationally reaches you. And absolutely, it also gives you hope. But you can see the importance of the mind in this. Hope's not a physical thing. It's actually something that I do with my thinking that then, of course, will translate into activity. But what is the mindset or the kind of thinking that creates hope? And as I mentioned before, one is not to get into the what if in a negative sense. Because as soon as I start to imagine outcomes that are not good for me, it's very difficult for me to have hope, very difficult to have energy, and very difficult for me to lift myself out of my situation. So my mind needs to be very positive. And, you know, you may say, well, it's all very well saying have a positive mind. But, you know, this is a key thing. For someone to feel hope, they need to feel, and it was mentioned, you know, things being done to you rather than for you. You need to regain something of control or mastery. Now, we may not have mastery of the physical situation around us. That might be out of our control. But we can begin to develop mastery over our minds. And I always remember, some of you will know the work of Gabrielle Martin, who has done extensive work with trauma. And he says that trauma is not so much what happens to you, but how you respond to what happens to you. Very interesting. And so how am I responding to the world around me, or to the situations around me, or to what's happening in my relationships? This is where I can come back to some self-mastery. And this is where I can begin to again develop hope and begin to move towards a positive goal. When you're in a situation of captivity, well, what can you do in a sense? But there is an atmosphere that you can create even then. And you will know many stories where people have begun to relate to their captors as well. But one story of a hostage right now in Palestine who was released, and she said that she felt light around her, and she knew that she had to keep up hope for the others who she was with. And one day, one of the captors lit a candle and put her name on it. And she said, "Why are you lighting that candle? Why are you putting my name?" And he said, "Because when you are here, around you, there is light." Very interesting. Now, the situation has become just intolerable. And as I say, I don't want to get into the politics of it, but really, there's a huge, huge amount of suffering. And I think all our thoughts and good wishes and feelings and prayers are for the suffering to stop for everyone on all sides. Everybody is suffering. So there is something I can do, even in the most difficult situations. And another thing, I remember Robert Mueller, who was an Assistant Secretary General of the UN, and he wrote a book about his time as a prisoner of war in the Second World War. And the heading of his book was, most of all, or the title was, most of all, they taught me happiness. So he was able to keep hope alive in very dire circumstances. And this takes tremendous courage and inner strength. And this is where self-mastery is required over my thoughts, over my feelings, over myself. And, you know, as that quote from Terry Waite, "You can't possess my soul." Nobody can possess our souls. The soul is me. And the soul has huge resources within. And maybe in the second part, we can go into that in more detail. But in keeping hope alive, in moving in the right direction, I always feel it's important never to put limits on myself. Sometimes we say, well, this is my capacity. No, I don't like that word capacity. I'm taking this step, I'm moving forward. It can be anything. Capacity is unlimited. So don't limit the self at all. But of course, the other foundation is, and we've sort of mentioned it in between, not to get into negative self-talk or weak self-talk. So once I begin to talk to myself as if I'm not worthy of something better than my current situation, no matter what it is, once I begin to talk to myself that I'm not capable of doing something, once I talk to myself that others maybe don't think I'm capable, or they don't like me, or whatever it is, as soon as I get into that kind of negative self-talk, then hope dies, actually. It's very, very difficult to have hope. And so valuing the self, loving the self, knowing that I have a greater ability and possibility than what I see right now in my current situation. Keeping this alive inside is really what can keep hope alive. Thank you for the first part of it, and maybe now a meditation. Yes.
It'd be lovely, Maureen, if you could lead us into a meditation together. We'd very much appreciate that.
Right. So sit quietly, comfortably, feet on the floor. Take a long, deep breath. To relax the body. And then gently draw your thoughts inside, away from the past, away from the future, to be present here with myself. By discovering and knowing myself, I can begin the path towards self-mastery. Who am I? I'm light, a being of light who inhabits the physical costume of the body. And there are many labels of my roles and ethnicity and nationality and so on, through which I'm identifiable. But there's a greater being of the self, the light, that is playing those roles, that is acting through the eyes, the ears, the mouth, being within. Call it consciousness, soul, or spirit. It is the essence of who I am. And the focus for that energy, the light, is in the center of my forehead. Let me visualize the beautiful light, point of light in the center of my forehead. And as I bring all my attention to that point, there's a deep feeling of peace. I am a being of peace. Peace. Peace is my original state of being. I am a being of peace. As this grows in my awareness, I feel a sense of comfort. It's as if I've come home to myself, the real me. And this inner peace allows me to calmly, gently direct my actions through this body. I hear something in my state of peace. I can choose whether I wish to absorb it and believe it or not. I see something. Am I taking a conscious decision whether I wish my thoughts to engage with it or not? And as I speak, as I act, am I simply reacting or truly, as a master of the self, responding? Being a master of my mind and ultimately my feelings is the pathway to a life filled with hope. Thank you. Om Shanti.
Thank you for taking us on that journey, Maureen, with you into our inner space and forging that connection between our inner peace and developing hope. You've moved through a lot of terrain already, and it's captivating. Some of the key points that you've made are really, really useful. And I'm loving the way that you bring in your personal experience to kind of really make it very real for us around how we actually develop hope and the power of hope, the actual power of hope in situations. So I'm going to invite you to keep on sharing with us,
Okay.
and there's a couple of questions, and we'll hold those until you've have the chance to, if you like, give us part two.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yes, the more I was thinking about it, I could see the part that it plays in my life and in the lives of others, which is very nice. But just a few more words about this concept of optimism, because it really is, I was thinking, to have hope, you need that background mindset of optimism. And you have to keep that alive. And I remember meeting, I think, a second cousin. I hardly knew him, and we met at some family gathering. So he was asking me what I do and everything. So I was telling him, and we were having a very good conversation. That at the end of it, he says, "Well, my dear, you're an idealist." And I said, "Yes, I know." And I liked it because I thought, somehow he picked up on my mindset that I was refusing to see a future that was only doom and gloom, etc. but that there is a brighter future for myself and for humanity. And I still, in the midst of everything that's happening, I still firmly believe that, because, you know, it's like, you know, the breaking down before the new. You can really see now the ascending energies and descending energies. You see the negativity, but you also see how people are becoming so much more aware that there has to be a different way. And when somebody has an optimistic mindset, then they actually, you see things differently. And I can only think of, well, of course, my own experience, but our elder sisters that we have in our community, many of them who lived with the founder have now passed on, because that was from 1937 till now. So they were young girls, but they lived into their 80s, 90s, even hundreds. But they had this mindset that it was very difficult for them to see anything negative. And even if you tried to point out something about someone, maybe it's good that, you know, this elder sister knows, etc., the response you get was sometimes a bit of puzzlement, because they literally couldn't see it. You know, to me, it was glaringly obvious. For them, they couldn't see it. And they would say, no, 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 this person's very good, very good. And of course, when that person was in their aura, they really became good. And I thought to myself, well, if I was able to maintain that vision, that optimistic outcome of the best that they can be, well, maybe I'd help them to remain good for longer. Maybe them help them to really be that in their life. So, you know, I began to see how the part that mindset plays. And so if you have a human being, well, if you think of a human being, any human being, and I remember one of our elder sisters saying this once, nobody is ever as good as you think they are. Nobody is ever as bad as you think they are. And if you see someone and you begin to see their defects, it's like you can't see any virtues or qualities in them at all. Negative upon negative. And then conversely, you begin to praise them and put them on a pedestal. And, well, even though they may be deceiving you, you can't see it. So actually, we mustn't get into either trap. We need to use wisdom in everything. And this comes back to our inner selves and the innate qualities that we have that can really give us this mindset of optimism, but yet wisdom, discernment, understanding. And actually, another quality that plays a very big part is empathy. Empathy really helps to give people hope. But coming back to our inner resources, so yes, we meditated on peace, but each one of us has an inherent goodness. And that goodness is of several qualities. Yes, peace. Yes, love. Yes, wisdom. Yes, purity. Yes, happiness. These are our core qualities, actually. And when you speak about them or start to think about them, it's a nice feeling. Why? Because actually this is more natural for us. You know, how long can a person stay angry? When you boil water, it'll stay hot for a certain amount of time, then it'll cool down. And most people who get angry, they cool down after a while. Sometimes anger continues, but think about the use of energy. My thoughts are my energy. The thoughts, the breath, the energy, all connected. And so if I'm harboring angry thoughts for a long time, sometimes years, what am I doing with my energy? I'm not doing anything creative, not able to move forward. I'm absolutely stuck in a time war of something that happened that made me angry. And I always remember a saying somebody said to me. They said, if you get angry, all you're doing is showing the world that you're a fool. And I like that. But how am I using the energy of my thoughts? Is it in a pessimistic way? Is it in an optimistic way? So am I beginning to see that which is really good in others? And am I able to therefore ignite and fan the flame of that goodness? Because it is inherent in everyone. Even though it may seem to be very buried, it is there. Can I fan that flame so that that person begins to feel that their life can move in a different direction? Or am I just continuing to see their defects and I'm actually pushing them further and further down? Very, very important. So an optimistic mindset will always see the best, but yet will use wisdom in every situation. And with wisdom comes the power to discern, the power to take the right decisions. Because, think about how we take a decision. We may weigh up pros and cons of something, but when it comes to that moment when you decide, it's your inner feeling that tells you. And that's your inner wisdom, or you can say conscience. And that's what we need to listen to. And people are so, of course, I'm generalizing, but so external in the world at the moment, so focused on, possessions or power or position, etc. So focused on proving themselves or seeking approval, all very, very external. That inner voice or the inner conscience gets overshadowed. It may try to speak, but the soul at that moment cannot listen. And so empowering ourselves within, igniting or rekindling the inner goodness is what is going to give us that optimistic mindset that is the backdrop for hope, active hope, or sacred activism. I've been going to some of the COP conferences, as was mentioned, and you listen to the science and it's like, no hope. But yet I see so many people working with hope. And I love Christiana Figueres, who was the executive director of the panel on climate change in 2015 when the Paris Agreement came into being. She's now written quite a bit, but she wrote a very nice book called The World We Choose. And one of the threads running through it, and she now has an organization connected with this, is this concept of stubborn optimism. That's what I saw in our elder sisters, just refusing to see a negative outcome, stubborn optimism. And this really has an energy that can take us forward. But of course, there are so many things to work through in the self to clear the way for this stubborn optimism, this hope, this real true use of our inner resources to really make a difference in the world. And, it was very interesting that a couple of months ago, I was at a conference. It was held at the Royal College of Psychiatrists here in the UK. And the theme was, what has God got to do with it? And normally psychiatrists don't talk about God, not here anyway. I don't know if it happens in Australia. But this was all really looking at the concept of how the belief in, and they were using the phrase higher power, actually has helped and benefited patients, and that it's something to support in patients. And there were some very moving presentations and examples. And I was, I felt a very, very heartwarming day to feel that, and it was actually part of a special interest group of spirituality and psychiatry, and they brought this together. This idea of a higher power, and of course, in the 12-step program for AA and so on, it features very much. And there was a whole presentation about it. But just thinking about our own lives, just thinking about the world, what is it? How can we connect to something greater that can really give us huge amount of strength and energy that will be more, if you like, it will multiply my own efforts, my own endeavors. And we need that right now. We have really got ourselves into a mess. And when I came back from Ukraine, I was interviewed by someone, and he asked me, well, people are saying, why is God allowing this? Where is God in all this? And I said, well, yes, it's a good question. Where is God in all this? But I'd ask the question, where is humanity in all this? And he said, yes, I understand. But with the help of that higher power, we can begin to do something extraordinary that can really bring about change. So if you combine that optimistic mindset, really drawing on your inner resources, and then the active work of hope, I really think we can make a big difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Some lovely moments coming through there in your conversation. I'd like to just check in on a couple of questions here. Someone's asking, what are some methods that we could use to always be hopeful in our daily lives? Actual methods.
Yeah, no, that's good. So one is, part of what we're doing when we're talking about going within and so on, it's meditation, of course, and you would have talked a lot about that before. So a daily practice is really, really helpful because it keeps up the inner strength. But the other thing that I find really helpful is when you're faced with a challenge or something negative, to always give a pause. Because I need to put a gap between that negativity that's coming to me and myself. Otherwise, I'll just absorb it, it'll penetrate me, and your feelings will begin to become negative. And you actually then become, if you like, a slave to the negativity that the other person or the situation is giving you. And you move away from that self-mastery. It's so important we give that pause, then we can consciously choose how to respond. And of course, it takes a lot of inner strength and a quality that's often seen as a weakness, but is actually a huge strength, the quality of humility. Because ego always wants to prove itself. So somebody challenges me, somebody, insults me. Oh, you immediately want to start to prove, no, that's not true, blah, blah, blah. Stop. Just put the ego to one side, because you all know what happens once you react negatively, the other person reacts even more, and you have a whole escalation before you know it. And it's not a good outcome for anybody. So I have to break that cycle by giving the pause. And I find that very, very helpful. And of course, to have a lot of understanding of others, because somebody may be negative and I may want to react to them. But do I have an understanding of what they may have been through, what may have just happened to them in their life? You don't know. Give a pause for some understanding so that you can be more compassionate in your response. So these are some of the things that definitely I practice for myself. And then that keeps the positivity and the hope alive. Yeah.
It's so useful, isn't it, to sort of have a few methods at hand and to be able to remember them in the moment that you need them, and be able to use them too. But bringing in that beautiful quality of humility is one of those essential elements. And I like the way that you're moving with empathy and humility and these other gorgeous qualities that keep me safe in many ways.
That's a lovely term. Yes, it's about safety. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And the best protection is virtue, is goodness. Sometimes people ask the question, well, how can I save myself from other people's vibrations of negativity? So, well, don't, if you feel you have to save yourself, there's a little bit of fear there, right? But if you're generating goodness in your thoughts, your vibrations, your attitude, there's a force field around you and the negativity can't penetrate. So yes, to keep giving is a big thing. Yeah, thank you.
I think that was demonstrated in the example you shared with us around the woman who was captive and her captor put a candle with her name near it because she had been feeling the vibration of light. I'm not sure whether she was feeling what she was receiving from others or whether she created that vibration herself. Maybe it wasn't. Yeah.
But just to say, she didn't keep the candle in the light. It was her captor who did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it would have been both. She would have been because she was open to receiving her own qualities from God, but that leaves you open to. It opens a pathway for good vibrations to enter. That's important. Not the negative, but the good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. So thank you for those tips. And I think another one that you mentioned that I recalled was around staying in the present, not getting into the what if scenarios. So that's a lovely take home there as well. So someone's saying here that there's so much chaos and war in our world, and I see hurting people. Everything seems overly complicated and intense. How do I achieve a more simpler life?
Yeah. Well, one is very much on the external level. If I'm too caught up in the external or material things, I can make my life complicated. I remember one businessman saying, I have spent my whole life climbing up the ladder only to find out that I've climbed up the wrong ladder. So, am I developing my inner human qualities or am I simply accumulating? So that's one thing. And it's also good to declutter things like that. That helps you keep more simple internally, so you don't have so many things to think about. But the real essence of a simple life is, of course, your attitude and approach to life. And so if you value the things that are really meaningful to you, and when you ask people what's really meaningful to them and you ask them to reflect, everybody says the same thing. They talk about their relationships, they talk about love, they talk about family, they talk about their faith, they talk about compassion. These are the things that people really value or that are really meaningful. So if I really value those things that are meaningful to me, then my life becomes much, much simpler because I'm using good qualities. If I'm thinking about them, it means it's going to come through into my words and my actions. And so I'm setting up a positive response because everything that we do, everything that we say, even everything that we think comes back to us like an echo. So if I am good to people, I will experience that goodness coming back to me at a time of need. And the converse is true. So the real simplification is in my attitude to life.
Let's thank you for that. And I mean, if we see plenty of evidence, don't we, of overconsumption in our world. And that
Absolutely.
aspect of just decluttering our mind and also our physical reality, and move out of that space
But also,
of intense consumption.
just to interrupt you, but also, you know, when you think about climate change and you look around you and how much plastic do we use? It's unbelievable. And if you consciously try to use other things, you actually, everything becomes simpler, because when there are products that are, you know, more natural, they're usually more simple. And so, you know, just our whole approach, you know, how much water do we use? You know, do I look for cruelty-free products? All this makes me feel much more positive, hopeful, and, you know, it simplifies my life. You know, it's a simple lifestyle is really, really helpful. Yeah.
There's double merit there, isn't it? It's simplifying your lifestyle, but you're contributing really positively to co-creating a better world. So a lovely feeling. Yeah, it brings a lovely feeling of personal empowerment and agency, doesn't it? You know, that I'm doing something. And I think that was something Barack Obama said was, you know, don't wait to feel hopeful, get out and get into some action that is hopeful, and you'll begin to feel that. So he was so much focused on social activism from a hope perspective. Here's a question here that we're coming to, and it's, are we at a turning point in our world trajectory, or are we spiraling forever downwards? What do you think? And what role does spirituality play in all of this?
Definitely we're at a turning point. Absolutely. And you know, that saying, the darkest hour before the dawn. The dawn is coming. And if you look for it, you can see it actually. Definitely the turning point. It's not possible for the world just to keep spiraling down and that's it, and there's no more world. That's just not going to happen. It's about the turning of the seasons, if you like. We're now coming back into the spring. And, you know, when it's springtime, or just before the springtime, or even in the winter itself, the shoots are already coming up, but you can't yet see them because they haven't yet broken through the soil. And so those shoots are coming. And the foundation for the change is absolutely spirituality and spiritual power. There's actually nothing else that can change the world. Just coming back to climate change, there are so many people looking for technological solutions, carbon capture, carbon credits, all these kind of things. It's not going to change the world. But where people develop respect for nature, that will change the world, because the way we use our resources will change. So the change comes from within, and it's a spiritual transformation from within that then has an impact on the whole living world. And so we actually, as a human race, have a huge responsibility for this spiritual transformation. And so, yes, let me choose to be part of it. And that really gives a huge amount of hope. So, yes, we are moving towards dawn and the spring and a better world.
And so on that, Maureen, what could an individual do to be part of that spiritual, what would you call it, a revolution or a spiritual transformation that brings about a change in nature because of a changed attitude within us? What kind of things could an individual do to make that happen, contribute to that?
I like the term revolution. Because I think it is a revolution, because it's a completely different way of looking at the world and a different way of thinking and working. And I would say the first thing, you know, don't be afraid to be different. Don't be afraid to be spiritual. Sometimes people think that, you know, if I tell people I meditate, or I tell people, well, especially now, it's often out in the mainstream, but show up, be present, you know, you know, find out, well, I suppose even before that, find out about spiritual practices. And of course, there are many. And of course, at the Brahma Kumaris, we have many spiritual practices and meditation, Raj Yoga meditation. But you have to find what fits you and what you feel comfortable with and what you feel is transforming, because a spiritual practice must always be transforming my consciousness. My consciousness shifts so that old patterns are left behind and I'm developing new patterns. And so begin with a spiritual practice, look and see what feels good for you, really begin to practice it. Think about changes in lifestyle, such as vegetarian, even better, being dairy-free. That has a huge impact. But first of all, a huge impact on myself, on my health of my body. So begin to think about different ways you can live. First of all, the thinking, but then the living that can actually have a better impact on the climate, on the animals, on society. And don't feel that you just need to do what everybody else is doing because that's what they are doing. You follow your conscience, do what you know and feel is right to help make a better world. And, you know, people will respect you for that. When I first started studying with Brahma Kumaris, of course, different lifestyle, and my family, actually, they were supportive and I was grateful for that. But I can also see there were a lot of things they didn't say to me in the early days. You could see this question mark on their heads, you know, and certain people thought, oh, this is not right. But I knew this was so important and I wasn't going to move this way or that way. So follow your heart, follow your conscience, follow your inner knowing, and really take that decision to live in a way that can really benefit others around me in the world.
It's lovely. Thank you, Maureen. You mentioned ascension and descension at one point, and this question may have come from that comment. Navigating unmarked territory to find our way through a challenge could be an inherent drive in the human spirit. But how do we find our way to somewhere we've never been before?
Well, you can think that you've never been there before, but if you're going towards the destination of a world of peace, a world of love, but even before that, an inner world of peace, an inner world of love, an inner world of compassion, an inner world of non-violence that then is expressed in the outer. Because remember, everything that's within is reflected without. It's a spiritual law. So actually, it's actually natural to us. So actually, we have been there before. So it's not so much that we are going somewhere we haven't been, but it's a question of remembering where we have been. And it'll come to you.
Thank you for that. Here's another question. What should I do when someone keeps insulting me, even when I'm not reacting?
Well, if you're asking the question, then you're reacting inside somewhere. And I'm saying this, I'm not perfect at it, you know, we're all a work in progress. But I remember once seeing one of our elder sisters, and she was in a talk, and somebody asked her, what would you do if somebody in front of a group of people accused you of something? She said, well, if really I'd done something wrong, I'd say I'm sorry. And if I hadn't done anything wrong, I'd just ignore it. And I thought there's no ego in that answer. And so actually our whole, if you like, spiritual journey, a big, big part of it is about replacing the ego with my divine self. So, or the real self. So the ego will try and pull us back again and again, give us that feeling of insult, etc. But you have to say, it doesn't matter, it's okay. And, you know, if somebody's insulting you, that's the part that they have to play in this drama of life. And they're expecting me to react. So I play the part that they are asking me to play, but it's not my part. Let them play their part and do their bit, and I remain as I am. And I really saw this in our elder sisters. They were really able to do it. So just stay free, really stay free. And then actually the person stops doing it, because you see, if you affect it in your mind, vibrationally, it sends a signal, even though you don't say anything.
It's a lovely response, Maureen. Thank you for that. It's worth all of us practicing that, isn't it? Having a go with that one.
I know, I have to practice it.
And it becoming part of our spiritual toolbox. um, here's a question kind of comment. It seems to me that you've lived a very spiritual life and have maintained a commitment to towards making a better world a reality. What role has God had in shaping your life and helping you to maintain hope in a world that seems mostly doomed?
Well, that's a nice question. I was brought up with faith, brought up Jewish. And, you know, my parents, you know, were very, a lot of faith in God. So it was like, that was never a question, you know, growing up. And although, you know, in the Bible, the Old Testament, there's all this sort of concept of God as punishing and, you know, getting angry and so on. Somehow in my heart, when I would pray or whatever, take part in things, I just felt God was a loving energy. I always felt that. And then when I was about, I think 40, 15, something like that, I really began to search. I really wanted to know more about life, the universe, about God. And that brought me to several spiritual paths. And meanwhile, I got married. I was training in speech therapy, then working. So, you know, all those experiences. And then, you know, when I came to Brahma Kumaris, I really felt home. You know, when you come to something, you feel, okay, now I'm home. And of course, once you come home in that sense, then your journey really begins, because then when you do make that commitment to a spiritual life and you do make that commitment to really doing something that can benefit the world, you know, you can't hide anymore. You have to begin that path of self-transformation, and it can often be painful, but you know that you have to keep going, and you know that the dividends of that are great. So God has played a very important part, because I also feel that through my life then, as I've faced those challenges, I felt that God has been with me as a companion. And also, if I have that strength to hand that difficulty, challenge, whatever, over to God, God will take it. Sometimes I don't have the courage because I keep thinking about it. But if there's a difficult situation and I say, okay, I've done my best. Now that's important. You have to do your best in whatever you're doing. If I've done my best with love, with goodness, then I can leave the result or the impact to the divine. Then God is going to take over. And I've done that many times with so many things. And it's like such a relief. But it's not that you say, well, I won't bother with something, God, you take care of it. No, you have to really be honest in whatever task you're doing, in your relationships, in your interactions, and do that with a lot of goodness and a lot of good, deep, good intention. And then you don't need to worry any further. God is really going to then multiply the impact of that and make sure that you don't feel a burden. So yeah, God has played a huge, and you know, that strength that you take enables you to transform. If you don't take that strength, you can just get caught up in your own negativity once it erupts, and it does erupt, of course, from the past, whatever we're carrying. But that connection gives you the strength to say, okay, I'm not just going to sit in this, I'm going to move on.
Sounds like you have a very personal relationship with the divine, Maureen. I recall a comment you made earlier. You, in our conversation, you mentioned that you asked God, "What should you do in a situation?" And when this person was dying, and the response you received was to give happiness. So that suggests a very, very personal relationship that you have with the divine.
Yes, I do feel it very personal. And I feel, you know, there's a being that really knows me completely, utterly, and accepts me. And that's a very beautiful feeling.
That's in contrast to sort of the fearsome Jehovah or the judgmental,
Yeah.
the divine.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
As I say, even early on, I felt God was a loving God. That was always my experience. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so. On that, perhaps you could take us into a meditation together,
Yeah.
on the note of the divine.
Oh, it'd be lovely. So again, let me relax myself and be ready for my inner journey. First, reminding myself of who I am. I, the being of light, the soul. I focus my attention on the center of my forehead. I visualize the light, the shining point of light. As I focus, all other awareness fades away, and I become the light. I am light. And my original nature is peace. I am a being of peace. I'm a being of love. I'm a being of wisdom, of truth. I have these wonderful qualities within. They are the very essence of my being. And in this soul awareness, in this state of peace, I take my consciousness beyond. Beyond this physical dimension. To a place of peace.
It appears that we've been having a few internet connection difficulties, and we lost Maureen in that very deep moment. She had shared a meditation commentary with us, taking us into that experience of connection with the divine and feeling that deep peace. So I'm sorry about that, viewers. We've lost connection with Maureen, but nevertheless, I'd like to thank her for sharing her experiences and her insights with us. It's been a rich conversation, and she's provided us with some essential tools on how to maintain hope and optimism. And Maureen, let's see, we're hoping you can feel this. We can't see you, but we're hoping you can feel a vibration of deep love and blessings to you for being a beacon of hope and optimism, and in the way that you've lived your life dedicated to global peace and upliftment. And it's a beautiful gift to give our world. So thank you for joining us on Youniverse tonight. And viewers, Maureen will be gracing our shores here in Australia from the 23rd of August to the 8th of September this year. And she'll be doing a speaking tour while visiting Melbourne, Brisbane, Darwin, Hobart, Canberra, and Sydney as well. So check out our website, brahmakumaris.org.au, for details on her public visit, including her public programs, and take the opportunity to go along to one of her programs and meet her in person. And viewers, you might like to browse our online bookshop, Eternity Inc., which has a full range of books on self-empowerment and inner powers, always available at not-for-profit prices, so do check that out as well. And if you'd like to subscribe to Open Your Eyes to the Youniverse, you can receive monthly updates, then please email us at special.events@au.brahmakumaris.org. And in terms of our next episode of Youniverse, it will be on Saturday, the 27th of July, at our usual time, 6 p.m. AEST. And we apologise in advance that there will not be a June episode of Open Your Eyes to the Youniverse, as many of our team will be in Chennai, India in June. But we're really looking forward to seeing you once again on Saturday, the 27th of July. And as we close out tonight, we'll play a song from Bliss called One Wish. So until we see you in July, take care, walk lightly on this earth, maintain your hope and optimism, and let these rays of light encircle our world and bring hope and optimism to our entire global family. So that's it for us tonight. Om Shanti.